So Mary Kathryn Scala, co-founder of Freight to Plate, thank you so much for joining me on the Vertical Farming Podcast.
Harry, thank you for inviting me.
Yeah.
I love listening to all your interviews, so I'm excited to add my 2 cents and my perspective on the industry. So thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, and it's always exciting for me when I get to find new folks in the space to talk to. And I think as long as I keep attending conferences, I'll probably not run out of people that I'm inspired by. We connected briefly at Indoor AgCon following your panel, which was moderated by previous host Nona. I've already interviewed Alaric on the show as well, so
Excellent.
that's great. So I think if you want to talk a little bit about that panel, kick it off because I think it was a great way. It was it was the final panel talk of the conference, but for me, it was one of the most impactful.
You know, I hope I don't sound biased, but I thought it was one of the most important conversations of the conference as well. It was an honor to have my voice added to that panel discussion. It's important because it was about the actual application of everything that we're seeing and we're creating. It's all about how it's actually impacting communities, actually impacting people, which I think at the end of the day should really be the first conversation we have. Really, like, how are these advances in technology and tech and how we grow, like how are they actually going to truly impact people? We should always start there because it is about people.
Yeah.
It's about feeding people and curing that hunger element that we struggle with and will continue to struggle with as our planet changes. So, yeah, I thought it was wildly important. Again, I was honored to be a part of it. And yeah, I think being there with Alaric and Cheyenne, two entrepreneurs, growers, and builders that are doing incredible work in the Las Vegas area, those are individuals that have dedicated their lives to growing food and feeding people and teaching people. So it was really an honor to be sitting at the table with them because they've dedicated their lives to it. And while I'm a little bit newer to the game, I've also dedicated my life to it. So it was great to learn from them and to be able to sit next with them and share my ideas and thoughts of how to do the thing.
How did the panel come together?
I actually have no idea. I wasn't even planning on going to the conference.
Okay.
I got recommended for the panel discussion and it through a friend at Cultivated, which is an awesome group.
Yeah.
And they asked for me to be on it and I jumped at the opportunity.
Very good.
So yeah, I
And
was referred.
did you get a chance to attend any of the other sessions?
I did, yes. Again, I think a lot of the sessions I heard the standard capex over pounds modeling for our industry and how to make the best penny off of each head of lettuce and really trying to maximize that whole model. And I understand, like, that's the way our industry is right now.
Yeah.
The industry is very much a capex over pounds. That's how we get our financial viability. That's how people grow in the industry. But I think, especially when we consider like container farming and these smaller footprint, large yield technologies, freight to plates. And my idea is there's, more metrics that matter that need to be applied to how we find financial viability. And I wish we heard more of that, more of like metrics that matter, like, again, impact
Yeah.
and social impact of technologies. So, you know, I was looking for, more diversity in the conversation. And
Yeah.
I feel like it didn't get there until the last panel
Yeah.
of the conference. So, yeah, again, learned a lot
Yeah.
and heard a lot of different perspective, but it was almost the same message, if that makes sense.
I guess when it comes to these types of things, it's helpful to have some hope that there is some progress being made. Shout out to Suzanne and the team at Indoor AgCon for actually, finding time to coordinate this. And I imagine in the next one with the feedback, I know that Indoor AgCon has been a sponsor of the show. And I think feedback from you, the attendees, and people saying that that was a really positive session will encourage them to keep doing like things like that. They did have the trip downtown to see the food desert, which was amazing. And then I know Alaric and his team were working on
Mhm.
that. So it's been
Well,
great
and
to see.
again, yeah, those are the things that like you see the impact. You see how the integration of the technology of these things that are being built. And you can't do one without the other. And it is amazing to see the advancements. It's amazing to hear like the stories of the people that are building the tech companies that are, building the tools that the integrators need to actually do the impacting. You need both, and we have to hear both sides of the story. And I agree, Indoor Ag did an amazing job. Like, wasn't it the biggest conference they've had?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It was a 10-year anniversary, and they doubled the size of the previous year.
Which is amazing. And you could feel the buzz, and you could feel that sense of like partnership and people wanting to share and talk about everything that they're doing. So, to your point, like they did an amazing job. Such a great conference. I can't wait to go back next year. And yeah, hopefully there's more conversations about the actual integration and what's happening in our communities through the technology and tech.
I think your point about different ways to measure success of a project, viability of a project, long-term sustainability, and you mention impact, reach. If you think about the tour, the food desert tour, and the fact that there's an education component to people who may not have grown, as strange as this sound, with any access to fresh food at all. Like you saw some of the lettuce that it was pretty sad looking. It was like wrapped in like cellophane. It was just like not fresh at all. And I'm happy to hear that previous guest Ali Daniali, the work he's doing with harvests, they were able to get a couple of container farms on the site already. So I think even since we've been there and we've had the conference, I think they've got 2 physical containers on the site. So they're working closely with Alaric to get that up and running. But you can just imagine, because we took a tour for the benefit of the listener through their quote unquote produce section that was completely empty. There was
Yeah.
nothing there. It was really sad. And, I grew up thankfully with some access to fresh foods but nothing too extreme. But, you take it for granted that you just see a wide variety. And I think part of like measuring success is, do we see folks that have come from low income neighborhoods being educated and trying out fresh foods and trying out recipes and teaching their family, educating their family on the benefits of what this access does.
Right. Which that's the one thing Freight to Plate is working really. That's our mission. Our mission is to, it's kind of radical, but to make fresh produce take it further away from being a privilege because it should be a right. Just like access to clean water should be a right.
Yeah,
Access to
exactly.
fresh produce should be a right. And, we're building our business in a way that we can help communities create, activate, and maintain hyperlocal food systems so that maybe not everyone is going to opt for it right from the beginning, but when it's part of your community fabric, when you can see it and touch it and you know that it's there, that's when you get adopters. And that's when, that real impact does happen. They have to see it, they have to know that it is there and it's there for them. And so Freight to Plate works to make that happen. Just like we're working with a really amazing nonprofit called By the Hand, and they have a footprint in a community called Altgeld Gardens, which
Okay.
is a community I spoke about on the panel at Indoor Ag too. But it's one of our most forgotten communities in Chicago and a true food desert. And their closest grocery store is roughly 8 miles, and the
Wow.
majority of the people in the community live under the minimum household income is like $19,000 a year. So it's a
Wow.
very underserved community. And we worked with By the Hand to raise a private fund to purchase a container farm
Okay.
and our services to help with that project. And what I mean, help with that project, it's like you can buy a container farm, but there's a lot that goes into actually integrating a container
Yeah.
farm into a community as a community amenity. So
Okay.
Freight to Plate does all those services in partnership with the nonprofit to make that happen. So
Okay.
now this community is going to have a container farm and the Freight to Plate programming to help educate the community, teach the students of By the Hand how to run that farm. And
Hmm.
then we've also partnered them with a local chef to purchase about 25% of the yield so that it
Okay.
helps with the operation costs. And then all the other food that's grown from there is going to go directly to the community at no cost.
That's amazing. I definitely want to dig into that model because it's really interesting, and it was one of the things that really I was paying attention to during the panel. I do want to rewind the clock a little bit
Yeah.
because it looks like you got your start in Texas, actually not Chicago. So I'm curious where your entrepreneurial journey started. If you can, you don't have to give all the specifics, but talk a little bit about all the different things you've done. I've seen you've got some work in the restaurant business, distilleries, a pretty wide range of experiences that probably, if you look back, led you to this moment. But can you talk a little bit about that what that journey's been like for you?
Yeah, I'm a jack of all trades, but I believe every entrepreneur finds that they're a jack of all trades as well. And so
Yeah.
maybe that's not so special about me. But Harry, I grew up in Chicago. So born and raised
Okay.
in Chicago, and I moved to Texas in 2011.
Okay.
And purely for a change of scenery and a change of lifestyle. I had nothing waiting there for me, but that was just something I felt like I needed to do. I was going to culinary school at the time at Kendall College in Chicago,
Okay.
and I just had this calling to like go just get into the world and work and see where that path would take me. So I moved down to Austin and yes, worked every element of the restaurant industry. I've always been super obsessed with food, cooking it. I've always loved dining experience. I'm a middle child of a big Italian family, so
Okay.
like it's in my blood. I think bleed marinara sauce or something. I don't know. So food has always been really important, and it's always been something that has brought family and friends together.
Yeah.
So in Austin, again, I worked every element of the restaurant industry.
And
And
you were in Austin before the Austin boom.
I was, yeah. I got real sick of craft beer before craft beer got even its like big push. I
Yeah,
remember
yeah,
when
yeah.
like everybody started to really get into craft beer, like I've been drinking craft beer for 2 years now. I'm done with
That's
it.
so funny.
But being in Austin at that time, I got to try a lot of things, and also being in Austin at the start of the like startup boom there as well. So
Yeah.
not only was there the micro distilleries and the micro breweries, but small tech companies were starting to relocate
Yeah.
to Austin. So I got to dip my toe into the startup life that way. I
Mhm.
worked for a food delivery service,
Okay.
and it was kind of in the era of Blue Apron, which I thought was really cool. But one differentiator that we took was we would portion out all the fresh produce. So if a recipe called for onion, but it was a single meal prep, they wouldn't get a full onion because that would just create food waste.
Yeah.
So we were really focused on eliminating as much fresh produce waste as possible.
That's
It was a,
great.
yeah, it was a really cool opportunity. Learned a lot. I was employee number 2 on the team, so
Oh
I
wow.
saw it from the very beginning, and it was that experience that really you know, gave me the itch and the knowing that like entrepreneurship was something that was going to be with me. It was something that I am, and I had to
Yeah.
carry that on. So that was like the first touch of it. And then from there, I went on to build furniture. So I was a furniture builder. I don't know if you know that about me, but
I
yes,
did see that. Yeah.
I was a carpenter for a couple of years.
What attracted you to that?
I know this is going to sound funny. Wood.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, just being able to work with wood was something I just wanted to try.
Yeah.
And again, I think living in Austin, having grown up in Chicago, which is a major city, and like
Mm-hmm.
the lifestyle and the way you function is a lot different than what I was experiencing in Austin. I felt like I had walked into a world where I could really try anything that I wanted
Hmm.
to and like feel safe in doing that. And so, yeah, I made friends with an artist slash carpenter, and he let me use some of his space, and he taught
That's
me
great.
some tools of the trade. And then I was a builder.
Do you have any pieces left that you made there? You still have them?
I sold over 40
Oh wow.
floating shelves. So I've got clients all over the country that like still check in with me about the floating shelves I've made them.
That's great.
Yeah, I don't have anything in my possession that I've built, but Mary Kathryn specials are still hanging on walls all over the country.
That's good. That's nice to know.
Yeah. And then from there, I started working with a micro distillery, again, out of Austin called Treaty
Mm-hmm.
Oak. And that was an amazing experience because they were doing something really unique. They had a bourbon portfolio and a gin portfolio, and
Mm-hmm.
it was craft, Texas craft spirits. But what I learned from them and the founder, Daniel Barnes, who's like a mentor of mine and someone that I really have like always looked up to, he built a brand that encompassed so much, and everybody that worked there, like they lived, they breathed, and
Yeah.
like that was their heartbeat. And I
Yeah.
thought that was so cool. Like I'd never been a part of that. And so I got to do that and learn that and see how being part of a company and part of a team can really transform people. So that was super special. And Treaty Oak is really what brought me back to Chicago.
Okay.
Because I opened up the Illinois and Michigan market for them, and
Oh,
I
okay.
was doing a lot of back and forth between Austin and Chicago. And finally, I was just like, I'd been away from my family unit. Again, I'm one
Yeah.
of five. So I'd been
Okay.
away from them for, almost 10 years, and I was ready
Wow.
to come back home. And so I did. And then, like 8, 9 months later, COVID happened.
Yeah. I saw it was interesting because I saw the timing of when you started Freight to Plate. So, which is funny because this podcast actually started in March of 2020 as well, because
Really?
the idea came before COVID. I've shared this plenty of times for the benefit of the listener, but this client had given me a book called Abundance by Peter Diamandis, which led me to a section on vertical farming, which led me to Dixon Despommier's book, which is, I have podcast experience. My first show I started in 2014 called Podcast Junkies. I interview other podcasters. I've done over 300 interviews, so very familiar with long form interviews. And then we own a podcast agency. We produce shows, so I had the two skill sets. And so I
Mm-hmm.
started, but then, obviously no one knew it was coming, and I was starting my first interviews. And thankfully, I'll always give thanks to David Farquhar from IGS, who, was in his house in Scotland somewhere during COVID. I said, "Do you still want to do this?" He's like, "Yeah, let's do it." And we had a great conversation. He's been on 3 times now. So it was an interesting time. And obviously, everyone went through a wide variety of experiences. I had a loss from a friend as well from COVID. So it was an interesting time. So I'm wondering if you could share, what was happening in your world, as that was coming to pass.
Yeah. It was scary for so
Oh
many
yeah.
different reasons. And
Oh yeah.
I was working for a restaurant group at the start of the pandemic, and I had been ready to kind of transition out, and I had an itch for the entrepreneurial spirit, but like was trying to figure out what that was going to be. And then the pandemic hit, and I was furloughed, and it terrified me because I didn't know what was going to be next. Like, what could be next? Is hospitality even going to be around at what I wanted to do? Like, it was almost like a midlife crisis for everybody all at the same
Oh
time,
sure.
like not knowing. And so being an avid food lover and then like being sequestered and then going to grocery stores and seeing the devastation like was so overwhelming to me, and it made me get a little bit obsessed with like what could be next, what would be next. So I spent weeks just in the deepest dark nooks of the internet, like trying to see what could there be and looking
Yeah.
for food supply, like. And I was kind of thinking growing, but I don't have a background in agriculture. I didn't even know what to really look into. It's just like I slowly but surely got to the right article about, container farms and like what the possibility is there. And like I remember reading that article, and for the first time in, 3 weeks or something like that, feeling a little bit of hope and really being inspired about controlled environment agriculture. And Harry, it really didn't take that long from like me reading that article to Freight to Plate coming into existence. Like
Hmm.
it was almost, I know this is going to sound like, a big yes unicorn in the sky story, but it was about 24 hours after I read that article that my
Wow.
sister called me and said, "Hey, I know you got a lot of time on your hands because you've been furloughed, but I've been asked to look at a spec sheet for a container farm. There's a nonprofit that wants to see if they can get one for this community. Like, I think if anyone could make this happen, it's you and me. Like, what do you say?" And
Wow.
I looked at it and I was like, I literally just read an article, like I was gonna like call the company and ask if they would hire me, and she was like, no, we can do this on our own. Like, let's figure this out. So
Mm,
like from then on, Freight to Plate came into existence. And, from the very beginning, it has always and will always be about bringing fresh, hyper local food systems to communities.
yeah.
And obviously, communities can mean so many different things. We'll always be a mission based company. So we do want to impact food insecure communities, but also
Mm-hmm.
schools and healthcare systems and mixed use developments. Like wherever there's community, there should be fresh food as
Yeah.
the foundation for it. So yeah, that was like the initial launch of it in like the first couple months of COVID. And then as we got further into the COVID experience, I just tried to get as much of my mind immersed into container farms and like what the power of it is, and went into really using it as my way to almost like a safety blanket for all the other things that were going on in the world.
Yeah.
COVID, social
Yeah.
unrest. Like, I think there was no shortage of things to make you want to like close your eyes and,
Yeah.
like forget it all. Finding Freight to Plate and finding that mission, like, really was a guiding light for me in COVID. And I'm so grateful for it.
That's an amazing story. It's very inspiring. And, sometimes these things happen in a way that make it seem like serendipity, but I think it's just a matter of being in the right place at the right time with the right mindset, with the right intention. Like, because you had an intention to do something that was going to be providing more meaning for you in your life and to
Mm-hmm.
serve these communities. And you had an awareness that there was more out there. And
Yeah.
I think I've got this saying that the universe rewards momentum. So like you have this forward momentum and then the pieces sort of fall into place, and it really is beautiful when it happens, and it just seems like a miracle sometimes, but
Mm-hmm.
just having the right pieces in place. So talk a little bit about those early days. What was the plan? What was the business model? And, how has that evolved?
Yeah. So the plan has and will always stay the same. Freight to Plate is a company that wants to help, create, activate, and maintain hyperlocal food systems. Again, at the beginning of it, like we knew that's what we wanted to do, my sister and I, but we actually didn't know what that meant. So it was like we had that big vision for it. It's always been the same, but we almost had to like take a step back and be like, well, if we're going to help people create them, activate them, and maintain them, we need to do it for ourselves first. So then we purchased a container farm. We found unused parcel of land in Fulton Market, which is a really cool area of Chicago, and we activated the farm and we created and launched Freight to Plate's first homestead, where we owned and operated the container farm and built a really successful, cool business out of that one shipping container. We brought on Michelin starred chefs from the Chicago landscape, different really cool culinary partners. We also brought on sponsorships like Whole Foods,
Okay.
worked with us as well. And so we built a really great model for a successful container farm. And so now that we knew that we could replicate that for other communities and other businesses as well, which is where we are now. Now we use our homestead location to showcase what a successful hyperlocal food system looks like. And so
Yeah,
that's,
I love the photograph you have, the photo on the main site. It's got like a skin on it or a painting on it. Is that a mock-up or is that what the real container
oh,
looks
that's what
like?
it really looks
Okay.
like. Yeah. Again, we see the container model as a really impactful tool
Yeah.
for hyperlocal food systems and like how we integrate into communities. I mean, not only is it the right footprint, it gives you the right yields, and it's a blank canvas. So you
Yeah.
can, create whatever imagery around it that will enhance your community.
Hmm?
And we decided for our homestead to, take it literally and
Yeah.
create a home space. And so the artist we worked with, his name's Sick Fisher, he's awesome. And now he'll probably paint all the containers that we integrate into communities because he did such an awesome job.
Yeah. Yeah.
But he made us our mid-century mod farmhouse, and now it's part of our brand, and you can't really separate that image from
Yeah.
Great to Play any longer.
Yeah, and I'll encourage the listener to head to the website ftp.farm to take a look at it because it's really beautiful.
Yeah.
So I want to get into the specifics because obviously we hear a lot of origin stories here, people getting started, but I also want to give people a realistic expectation of what's involved, like how much work is involved, and how many hours did you put in those early days, and what was the known versus the not known, and maybe a little bit of the bumps along the way, just to give folks an honest picture about what to expect when taking on an endeavor like this.
Yeah. Well, I'm trying to think if I've had a vacation since March 2020. I think I have, but
Yeah.
it's every day. I think
Hmm.
it's really interesting because, farmers from the dawn of time, like that is your life. It's not a job, it's a lifestyle. And so entrepreneurship tied with agriculture, you're just piling on a lifestyle. So there's a lot of time and dedication, early mornings and late nights. And that might seem really daunting and overwhelming, but you're creating a life and a lifestyle that is never going to lose its value. It's only going to create more and more value the further along you take this journey when you get into field environment agriculture. So the value is there. I can say now in hindsight, God, I wish like I did a lot more reading and a lot more outreach to all different sectors. I think like you get tired because you're doing what's in front of you. I think in hindsight, I wish I would have given myself just a little bit of space around just putting one foot in front of the other to do
Okay.
like more research and more like outreach to, other industry members, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah.
Like I wish I would have had the opportunity to go to indoor ag back in
Yeah.
2020. Like that would have been awesome. So if there are
Yeah.
anyone, like any of your listeners, get to a conference and like actually go like see and hear people in the space. I really wish I had that because yeah, you can start walking down a path and you just see what you see and you know what you know, but it would have been so much more helpful to like have some extra input.
Maybe we'll coordinate with Suzanne and we'll put a panel together about starting your first container farm, and maybe we'll just come up with, maybe I'll
Oh,
moderate it and I'll have you on and we'll get some other
there we
folks
go.
on there and
Perfect. I mean, how well attended is that going to be? That'll be
oh yeah.
Suzanne's going to
Yeah,
love this.
I
We're
think
taking
it's
some
gonna
work off her plate.
yeah, helping her schedule this out. I'll propose it. I'd love to moderate a panel, especially around this topic of lessons learned, mistakes made, what to do, what not to do, because there's so many people I think that are excited about this opportunity, but if they don't have the finances in place, if to your point, the takeoffs or the things, if you think about the things you had to think about, which crops to grow, like who were you going to, you did mention the relationships with the Michelin star restaurants, which I think is important, but are there other things that come to mind in terms of like, not the ultimate checklist, but just things that people should be thinking about that they probably might not be or should be considering that are important?
Well, specifically with container farms, it is not as easy as finding the right manufacturer, which
Yeah.
that's also not easy, but like,
Yeah.
finding the right manufacturer and then purchasing and then having it delivered. Like especially in any metropolitan city, even if you're in a metropolitan city and you own your own property, there's a million different factors, zoning, permitting. Do you need an architect? What kind of fees are associated with that? What kind of utility pole are you going to have to bring per your city's ordinance? Like there's
Mhm.
a million different little intricacies that it's almost like impossible for a newcomer to know because even as someone myself and freight to plate we've gone through multiple projects now, like we're still finding little nuances, discovering little nuances that add time, like stuff that I don't know how to prepare people for, although we are right now putting together like a playbook that will call out all your different, you know, additional time and like financial things that you need to be aware of, but you just never know until you know. I just think the additional time that you need to put into understanding like where the farm's going to go and the permitting and zoning of it, and then understanding if you need an architect because that's also additional time and additional finances that go into projects.
It's something that I think when people think about a container farm, a lot of people think you're just dropping it into location, plugging it in, and then turning it on, and then the crops automatically like will come out like a conveyor belt or an assembly line system. But you mentioned things like an architect and thinking about the utility placement and working with like the power company, and these are specifics that are really important. And I think if not properly planned, you could lend yourself to failure on those first projects.
For sure. Well, that's why, system integrators like a company
Yeah,
like Freight to Plate, I think is
yeah,
really important for the industry, and why we're, continuing to fight to be a part of it and to share our experience and to be partners with, as many different groups and companies as possible, because it is important, and it's not fair to bring adopters to this into the space and then not help them succeed. And I think like helping them succeed is having groups like Freight to Plate that can help facilitate all the unknowns, because, gosh, I wish I could remember this guy's name, but I had this conversation with someone at the conference, and it's important, especially in an industry as new as controlled environment agriculture and where we are right now, for people to do what they do and do it well and not
yeah,
try and do everything.
yeah,
I
yeah,
think, you know, there are groups that can, I think, be at fault for that. And you can't know every intricacy of everything. So that's why partnerships are so important. So if you're building something, and you need to make sure that you're building that to the best of your ability, and so that that is successful. All the other parts of how is it going to, fire up and run, like, I think there should be some partnerships there
yeah, yeah. Makes
to
sense.
help like unload some of that, because there's just nuances that you just can't always know. Like, I'm not a builder,
Yeah,
Freight Plate's not a manufacturer, so
yeah.
we don't want to get into that space. We want to stay as system integrators and help the tech get into the communities as flawlessly and successfully as possible.
So for the folks that are new to Freight to Plate, talk a little bit about who makes for an ideal partner and what are some of the projects that you're currently working on.
Sure. An ideal partner, well, it's a couple prongs.
Yeah.
An ideal partner is a manufacturer that stands behind their product, that
Okay.
builds something that's reliable and has, great, strong warranties. Our community partners are nonprofits, they're
Mm-hmm.
real estate developers,
Okay.
healthcare providers, and those are the community, people that have the communities to integrate the tech into. And some of the really cool projects we're working on right now is, integrating a container farm into the Alkeld Gardens community with our
Okay.
partners by the hand. And Whole Foods Market has helped facilitate the activation of that farm. They've helped support freight to plate services for that community, so that,
Okay.
actual Whole Foods are getting to the plates of that community, which is a
Yeah.
really
Yeah.
cool partnership, virtuous circle there. And then we're also working with another really large food bank in the state of Illinois on a pilot project for one
Okay.
location, but it's with the intention to be rolled out to agency partners all across the state of Illinois. So,
Okay.
food banks are so important, and they're seeing that growing their own food on site and having that fresh produce element to be able to give to communities in need is really important. And Freight to Plate is helping facilitate that and make that happen.
And are you seeing like a varied crop mix in terms of what each individual community has a need for?
Yes. I mean, we try and tailor harvest menus to communities,
Okay.
at least the initial harvest.
Yeah.
So, to be specific, the Elkeld Gardens community, we kind of surveyed the majority of the community to see what they would have an appetite for being grown. And it was so interesting. So, like, two types of kale, mustard greens, collard greens, and two types of lettuce, a
Okay.
butterhead and a romaine. So,
Okay.
leafy greens and lettuces, and that seemed like everyone's really excited for that. And after the first harvest, we've already have like second survey out to say, do you want to see different things grown in the farm? And there are individuals that are calling out different crop types like
Okay.
rainbow swiss chard and arugula. So
Yeah.
that's been really interesting. For the food bank, they're going to stay very in line with lettuces and
Yeah.
and use the container to just focus on heads of lettuce.
Okay. Putting your entrepreneurial and business hat back on, what's a tough question you've had to ask yourself recently?
I'm trying to think so Freight to Plate is moving locations, and we had 2 locations that we were contemplating, and one was a lot bigger, and it was a hard decision to just with where the world is right now, like how
Yeah.
much are you going to bet on yourself? How much are you going to
Mm,
hedge on yourself and your projections to take the leap on the bigger, more exciting
yeah.
space? And that was a hard question because it was one of those, it's been a little bit of like a hard kind of like meeting a lot of adversity couple months. So this was a moment where in the midst of getting over meeting the adversity, like
Yeah.
looking at myself in the mirror and saying, do you still believe in yourself? Do you still believe in what you're doing enough to take another big leap of faith? And so that was challenging, and it took a couple days, which is the longest I've actually
Yeah.
like sat with a question, like questioning that. But we're taking the leap, and
That's exciting.
yeah, yeah, we've been doing a lot of quiet growing. That's what the last year has been about,
Yeah.
because we did go from a transition of owner operator of a farm to definitely digging into more of the consultants
Yeah.
and sellers of what we do. It was a huge transition. I don't think I really knew the impact of that transition, what that was going to be like. But I guess that's entrepreneurship.
Yeah. Lots of surprises, lots of leaps of faith, taking the
Yeah.
next step. And I don't know if you remember the Indiana Jones movie, I forgot which one, but there's a scene where he has to like cross this chasm and it looks like it's like a drop below, but it's painted in a way where it looks like it's the bottom. So essentially, he has to take the first leap and believe that there's going to be something there to hold his foot when he takes it, and he kind of takes it. So he takes that first step of faith. And I think as entrepreneurs, we keep hitting these milestones and these opportunities to decide, okay, are we going to push on further? Are we going to stay where we're at? Are we going to close up shop? And I feel like we're always being challenged, but I think that is a part of the entrepreneur's journey. And I think I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about, where you go to find like the strength to make a decision like that can, have potentially long-term impact.
We haven't really talked about this all that much, but my co-founder is my sister.
Yeah.
And it just so happens she's my best friend, and
That's awesome.
she is really who I get to like literally turn to, and we just look eye to eye and can have that conversation. And we have a big family, so it's all
Hmm.
family driven. I find a lot of strength and a lot of guidance within my family unit. So again, I get to look next to me, and it's my sister.
Yeah.
And then our older brother is also an entrepreneur and a business owner, and
Okay.
he is definitely a sounding board for us. He gets a little bit scared sometimes with the decisions Jacqueline and I make, but he's a really good sounding board, and
That's good.
he's a little bit more, he just has a different perspective, which is,
Yeah.
and then also, I take long walks with my dog Floyd, and
That's helpful.
yeah, answers usually come to us too on, block number 2 or 3.
Yeah, I think there's something to be said, and it's something I'm trying to do a better movement towards being outside, being in sounds, being away from the screen. My girlfriend is the opposite of me in terms of like being out in nature. We just went on a walk in a bird sanctuary yesterday, and I realized that when I'm in front of the screen, I feels like I can't tear myself away from it, or working on the business. Like I have to constantly be in that mindset. But I think there is something to be said for changing the scenery up, calming, the mind, reducing the noise, and connecting with nature and your loved ones, your pets, and all that sort of stuff. Because there's something, I think you access something differently when you're in that space that lets you make better decisions.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. Couldn't agree more. Yeah, even just sometimes bringing like fresh flowers home from the store can do
Yeah.
that as well.
Yeah. So it sounds like you've made a big decision for Afraid to Play It, and that you've got some interesting projects underway. So it sounds like we're going to have to keep getting an update from you and seeing
Absolutely.
what's
Yeah.
next. Yeah.
And again, Freight to Plate has been doing some quiet growing. And I think in the next, 3 to 6 months, your audience and even the Freight to Plate audience is going to be hearing a lot more about the projects that we'll be launching, that we'll get to talk about, and really our growth plan. And when we can share our new space and who
Mm,
our partners will be in that
yeah.
space, there's a lot to talk about. And so we'll have to bring your audience to Chicago
Yeah.
for a real live visit.
Well, I mean, we're in the same time zone. I'm in Minneapolis, so whenever
Yeah,
there's
you're not
something
too
ready,
far.
yeah, I'm due for a road trip to check out some of these places in person. I think I'm overdue. I've done the conferences now, and I need to start getting into some of these farms and
Hmm.
doing some videos and having some conversations on site, which I think will be a lot of fun.
Absolutely. We'll have the perfect space for you, Harry.
Yeah, yeah, that'll be awesome. I'm excited. Do you see opportunities, and have you had people reach out from other states about, seeing what you guys are doing and seeing the success you're having and sort of learning from you and how they can apply it in their home?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That's the whole model behind the homestead. It is meant to be a year round showcase of controlled environment agriculture. Our original homestead was an outdoor location. The container obviously is indoor, but like everything around it was outdoors.
Yeah,
So it was
yeah.
really great for 4 months of the year in Chicago. We had really great events. I mean, we've had people from all over the world come and
That's awesome.
yeah, meet with us and do trainings. So this new location is going to be year round, and we have a lot of space for workforce development, enhanced curriculum development, community events. We're really looking forward to it. And again, we're going to have multiple tech partners in the space with us. So when people come to the homestead, they'll be able to see all sorts of different footprints, a container farm, micro farm. There'll be different ways to integrate hyperlocal food into your home or your community at the new homestead location.
That's exciting. We'll make sure we have links to all the socials so people can follow the journey as well.
Absolutely.
So, as we get close to wrapping up here, what I've been doing on these podcast episodes is leaving some space towards the end of these conversations. The audience here, a lot of it is your peers and colleagues in the space. So, is there a message that you have for the folks in vertical farming, people that you've connected with, or people that you maybe haven't even met yet? But I just want to give you the platform for anything that comes to you that's top of mind.
You know, Thank you for making space for that. That's really cool that you do that. I think our industry is in need of continued and healthy partnerships. I think there's so much advancement in tech and software, and it's so cool to see it from this perspective. I believe that as an industry, we'll be so much stronger and really be able to impact the world in which we all want to if we work together. And I think that's really important to know, no matter whether it's a startup or a well-established company. I think there needs to be, space and true respect and desire for the partnership aspect.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I think you're seeing that in the experiences you've had when you got started. And I think you got a taste of it probably at the conference a little bit. And I think you're going to get more of it as more and more people become aware of the work that you're doing and how important it is for communities and creating this experience for people and connection to food, which I think, people, it's something that's inherent in us. And you mentioned your connection to your Italian heritage as well. But
Mm-hmm.
everyone, no matter really where you're at, there is some sort of connection to food. And you can mention specific meals to someone and they'd probably get a flashback to something in their child or something. So
Yeah.
I think it's all connected in a way that's really beautiful. And I think the more and more conversations we have about the work that you're doing at Freight to Plate, I think it can be helpful and inspiring for people as well.
Yeah. And let's not forget to be partners in all of
Yeah.
our successes.
Yeah, that makes sense. So you've got a really easy to remember website, ftp.farm. I love simple and easy to remember URLs. And so that was pretty smart for you to grab that. So ftp.farm. Anywhere else you want to send folks to get connected with you?
Yeah, on Instagram at Freight to Plate. And you can follow me on LinkedIn, Mary Scala. I'm probably the most active of the Freight to Plate team, but you
Okay.
can also follow Freight to Plate as well on LinkedIn.
Yeah. And you've provided all those links as well. And we're going to make sure to include all of those in the show notes as well. So all the links to all the socials, all the websites, and all the ways to get in contact you, we'll have those included. So I'm really glad we got connected. We're definitely sounds like we're going to be working on something for Indoor AgCon 2024.
I think so. Susan's going to love it.
Yeah, so this is definitely not the last of our conversation. So thank you for sharing your inspiring story. I had a feeling it was going to be fun and inspiring. And I think all the different ways that people come into this space is really exciting for me to share, because I think there is no one path. And I think you've clearly demonstrated that. But all the little pieces and all the little steps that you took, I don't know, and you may agree with this, but I think you wouldn't be where you're at had it not been for the experiences you've had, leading up to this.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I say this a lot. I got my butt kicked along the way, but I stand up taller and I've got a lot more opinions, which I think that's important. And
Yeah.
yet I wouldn't be where I am if it
Yeah.
wasn't for some of those whoopings.
Yeah. That's inspiring. Well, thanks again for your time. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. And thank you to the Vertical Farming Podcast audience. I mean it when I say, when the homestead doors open, hopefully this summer in Chicago, I want everyone to come and experience what the homestead in Chicago is all about.
Very good. We'll put that on the calendar. Thank you.
Thank you.